2022 was an amazing year in gaming, from surprising killer indies to massive AAA blockbusters that shook the gaming industry, to games that brought back big-time nostalgia with style. There was something for everyone in 2022. As for me, I found myself catching up on modern classics and delving into series I never got around to.
Hi, I'm Pyres from Pyres Gaming, and today I ranked the 23 games I beat last year from worst to best. So in 2023, I really made a concerted effort to try and finish games, complete them to credits. I do have one confession to make. While this is the worst to best, even the worst game on the list is still a good game. I would recommend any one of these 23 games to you at home. Now, I will say I do have a few representations in here that take the place of digital games, but this is a good representation of the games that I beat. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on every individual game. I will spend progressively more time on the games as we get closer to number 1. So, without further ado, let's jump into the list. At number 23...
Editor Pyrus here, butting in for just a second, interrupting this video because I forgot a game. So at number 24, Untitled Goose game. It's short, it's cute, it has a nice cel-shaded style to it. It's great for co-op, especially couch co-op. And just know, there was a 24th. It happened to be, in my opinion, the worst of the 24. Maybe that's why I forgot it. But it's still a really fun game, really inexpensive, really short. Great for playing with kids or significant other, and I definitely did enjoy it even though it's my 24th ranked game. Okay, back to the video.
At number 23, we have Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Night. It is a very dark Metroidvania where you are this little girl, a child of light, and you're trying to restore the world. And the way that you battle is interesting because it has its own very distinct art style, and it's actually these shadows of warriors past that fight in your place. The different warriors are basically like different weapons, and they have different benefits. They unlock different areas. It is a true Metroidvania. It is very dark. It does have multiple endings. I only played through to one ending. It does go on sale very regularly. It's not expensive at all, and I would definitely recommend Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Night. For number 22, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Now, I really love the Scott Pilgrim movie myself. Find it to be one of the best representations of video games meets life meets comedy. I find myself glued to it every single time it catches my eye. It has some great memes and GIFs if you're interested in that as well. As far as the game itself, it is a beat 'em up. I would say that of the beat 'em ups I beat this year, this was not my favorite. Main reason being the fighting can be a little frustrating from time to time, and it does feel like you don't have as much control as several other beat 'em ups. I did love seeing the characters playing through the story, beating the evil X's. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is a very good game. On to 21, Slay the Spire. Now, I know what you're gonna say. This game is meant to be beaten several times. I did beat it multiple times. But as an old school card game fan, in my childhood I played Magic the Gathering with my brother and friends, and honestly it was one of the best competitive times I had before video games really started to keep up. And as a deck builder slash roguelike, this is a really fun game that doesn't require split-second skills or those types of things. It's more of a problem-solving kind of game. What cards you get when, and that will affect your strategy and how you play the game. There are also a lot of different elements that you need to learn. It lends itself to multiple playthroughs. Slay the Spire in at 21. At number 20 is a game that I reviewed on the channel, Soul Hackers 2 on the PlayStation 5. Now, I will say that this was the most disappointing game that I purchased in 2022. The main reason being that I fell in love with Atlus's games, especially Persona 5, but Catherine Full Body was excellent as well. And I was really hoping that Soul Hackers 2 was going to live up to those high standards. It's not a bad game. I did have a good time playing it. It does bring back all the demons that you've seen in other Shimagami Tensei or Persona games, but it just lacked a little bit when it came to the level design and the dungeons. It got to be just a little bit grindy. I did like the bosses. I did like the art style. I did like the characters. Soul Hackers 2 is still a good time, but it's just not quite up to par for Atlus. At number 19 is another PlayStation 5 game, Demon's Souls. Now, I ended up on quite a Souls kick this year. for reasons that we'll discuss later on in the list. And Demon's Souls, while it was a great looking game, it played very well, it was modernized very well. I think it was the third Souls game that I played, and I did enjoy my time with it. I had to get used to grass as the healing mechanism. I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of the early weapons, but as far as the game itself, it looks great, it plays great. 60 frames per second in a FromSoft Souls game is awesome, and I look forward to more of it in the future. I didn't really care for some of the bosses, especially the gimmicky ones, but the level design, the enemy design, the look of the game, the feel of the game, the combat, everything was really, really good. I definitely enjoyed my time with Demon's Souls. On to number 18, and that goes to Cult of the Lamb. I definitely try to pick out the best indies from 2022 and jump on the train with them to try and see what they are about. And Cult of the Lamb is one that I technically cheated to get it on the list. The reason being that I almost finished it New Year's Eve, but of course it was New Year's Eve, so I had to take some time away from the game, and it happened literally before the end boss of the game. So technically I beat Cult of the Lamb on January 1st, 2023. Sorry about that, guys, but in my opinion, I had already beaten the game. The final boss did take me a couple tries, but it honestly wasn't a very big commitment of time. The majority of the game was already beaten. Cult of the Lamb is a very fun game. It kind of is a combination of sort of like a Hades meets Animal Crossing meets, I don't know, something gross. And I really enjoyed it. It was fun. The biggest issue with it, honestly, was a lot of bugs and glitches. I ended up playing on the Switch. The game would lock up in strange ways. You would do your different sermons, those types of things. Other than that, the combat was fun, slightly clunky, but fast, and it was pretty demanding at points. I liked the decision making that would come up when you have the opportunity to swap weapons or swap your special ability. It does add a lot of that life sim, farming, fishing, cultivating, and, you know, spreading your message to your cult followers. Sorry about the cult pun there. It just felt a tiny bit disjointed. That's why it's a little further down the list. I would still recommend playing Cult of the Lamb. It was a lot of fun, especially if you want sort of a cutesy meets cannibalism and sacrifice. And okay, let's move on to the next one. At number 17, we have Stray. Now, Stray, I did a full review of as well, and I really enjoyed the game. I thought that the game, it looked great. It had a wonderful aesthetic to it. It has a lot of heart for a game that is about a cat and a bunch of robots, but you do get sucked into the story. You definitely want to know what the heck happened here. B12 is a fun little sidekick, and working through what he's all about is a great experience as well. The biggest thing for me is that the gameplay is more point and click than anything else. You just sort of line up your cursor so that you can hit X to make a jump, and that's really it. There's also a little bit of unevenness when it came to the enemies, because you would finish with the little blobby guys and then you'd have a different type of enemy, but it wasn't like a mix that would come at you later in the game. So as you progressed, the threat kind of changed and the gameplay sort of changed with the threat. I did have a lot of fun with the game. I did really enjoy the story. It was one of the best indies of 2022. I argued in my video it's not the best indie of 2022, but we'll get to that later. A very polished product. I'm not a cat person, I have 4 dogs, but Stray was definitely one of the best games that came out in 2022, and I enjoyed my time playing it. For number 16, I talked about this in a recent video, but this is a JRPG that I finished at the very beginning of 2022, and it is always on sale dirt cheap. I'm talking about Scarlet Nexus. I played on the PlayStation 5 version. It's on most consoles, but it is fast. It has an art style all its own. It is fluid. The combination with the different abilities you get from your allies is great. It has a 2 protagonist system where one protagonist doesn't know what's happening with the other one, and then one of the protagonists will do something that seems absolutely crazy because you only see one side of the story, but then you can play through the second half as them, and then you start to understand why they did what they did. It was a really cool experience. It's definitely something I haven't experienced in gaming before. It is an action RPG, some pretty cool kill animations. There were some fun bosses. The biggest negative to the game is that it has some repetitiveness when it comes to the enemy design, especially the basic ones that you fight over and over. Also, it does have sort of a relationship building aspect to it, but it's a little half-baked, and it really just comes down to giving gifts to your allies. So there isn't a whole lot there in terms of decision making and choosing between your allies and those types of things. Fun, fast, frenetic, smooth, artistic, plenty of style. Scarlet Nexus coming in at number 16 for 2022. At number 15 is a game that really strikes at my childhood. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. This is another beat 'em up styled after the old school Turtles in Time Ninja Turtles game that was so popular in the arcades. I remember back when I was a kid, the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game on the Nintendo, when my brother and I got that, we played the ever-living heck out of it. I think at one point I told my parents or my uncle, I can't remember who got it for me, but I told them that if they got us that game, we would never need another game again. And while that was obviously not true, they ended up getting us for us, and we loved it. Shredder's Revenge honestly brings back those memories and that gameplay in a big way. I really enjoyed my time with it. The multiplayer dimension of this game, where you can get up to 6 people on the same machine, this honestly runs really well on the Switch. You can even, if you don't have friends hanging around, jump into games online, which was working seamlessly for me. Honestly, this was a great beat 'em up, the best beat 'em up that I played in 2022. The only negatives I found to this game is that the levels can be a little disjointed. It is intentionally campy, so if you don't like that, well, you're gonna be experiencing a lot of that. It has these little side challenges and those types of things, which are okay. They add a little extra element, but the game is not very difficult, so don't expect to have a whole lot of challenge with it. It's more about fun, enjoying that old school arcade action, and spending more time with the Ninja Turtles. So that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge in at number 15. At number 14 is the first game I purchased in 2022 from the brand new games, and that was Pokemon Legends Arceus on the Nintendo Switch. This is honestly the Pokemon game that feels the most like what Pokemon should be like, running around in the wild, not having it turn into a cutscene and pull you and your Pokemon away to a separate battle arena that doesn't look anything like what's going on. Everything happens in the open world, and it persists, meaning that you run around, you start a battle, and you throw your Pokemon out. You could run away, literally run away from the battle and leave the arena, and that'll end the battle. It just makes so much sense. You can run around the fight, get different angles. You catch Pokemon by, oh, who knew, just throwing Pokeballs at them. One of the things I had the most fun with was literally just running around, bopping 8, 10, 15 Pokemon at a time with Pokeballs and catching as many as possible. It was also fun sneaking up on giant Pokemon, trying to hit them in the back of the head to get that extra bonus, and trying to catch, what are they? They were like enraged Pokemon. The battling was fun. The agile and strength style added a little bit of strategy. I think there were too many one-hit kills in this game, especially as you get towards the end game. It just feels like you put a Pokemon out that kills their Pokemon, and then they put a Pokemon out that kills your Pokemon, and there's not really that back and forth like, oh crap, this guy just is about to get smashed, let me pull someone back. There isn't as much of that as in some Pokemon games, but that was honestly my biggest complaint. The special battles you have against the main bosses in the game are fun. They're different. They involve your trainer running around and jumping and dodging things and learning different patterns. There are some performance issues, especially when you're looking at Pokemon in the distance, but there aren't really performance issues when it comes to the Pokemon actually battling in front of you and the stuff close to you. A lot has been made of the limitations of the Switch, especially with the new Pokemon coming out at the end of the year, and that really struggling on the Switch and having slow down all kinds of things. But Arceus doesn't really have that. It just has that little bit of a frame rate glitch when it comes to stuff that's really far away. Some of the textures, some of the elements just don't look that polished. But as an actual Pokemon game, it was the most fun I had. I played all the way through, beat Arceus, which, if you've done that, requires collecting every single Pokemon in the game, and that's why Pokemon Legends Arceus comes in at number 14. What is it? Arceus? I don't even know. I played the whole damn game. I don't know how many hours. I don't know how to say the Pokemon's name. Moving on. For number 13, we're going back to a PlayStation exclusive, another classic series which had an update, and that is Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. I have a confession to make. I did not play the original Final Fantasy VII. The reason behind that is I didn't get a PlayStation until much later, PlayStation 1. I also did not have a PC that was capable of playing Final Fantasy VII. I think I tried it on my PC, and I think it was like a slideshow when I did. So that's my story with that. This is actually my first experience playing Final Fantasy VII in the remake, and I gotta say, it looks great. I wasn't 100% sold on the combat system, with it being real time, but then also having it be turn-based and charging up different meters and stuff. It took me a while to get used to. Square Enix had always had a reputation, even back to the original Final Fantasy games as early as like Final Fantasy VIII. Square Enix always did a great job when it came to cinematics and the overall look and design of the characters and the world, and they were really ahead of the game. And with Final Fantasy VII Remake, if you ever look at the original screens of Final Fantasy VII, I mean, it's blocky, and there's a gem in there somewhere, but it doesn't look anything like the remake. The remake does have a good story to it. As I understand it, it's only about 30% or so, a third of the original game. The 30% that you get lets you really dive in, learn about these characters, understand them with the voice actors, with the way that everything is played out through the cinematics and the story. You honestly get a lot of detail on this world and on these characters. The boss battles could get a little wacky. You've got Cloud dressing up in a dress. You're doing pull-up competitions and stuff. So there is some, you know, just general wackiness in there. Overall, just a huge step forward for the Final Fantasy franchise. I look forward to Final Fantasy 16 coming out later this year, I think in June. But Final Fantasy VII Remake was definitely an excellent game, especially if you're into the original. At number 12, we're going back to another mega franchise, this time for Nintendo, with Metroid Dread on the Nintendo Switch. Metroid Dread came out in 2021. I didn't really get to finish it off until 2022, but it is obviously the epitome of a Metroid. I guess you don't call it Metroidvania, of a Metroid. So it is what it is. I mean, it's the next generation Metroid. You have upgraded graphics, it's smooth, it's slick, it's fast, it plays really well, even on the Switch hardware. The power-ups and getting new abilities and stuff is, I mean, it's old school Metroid in a brand new coat of paint. The boss battles, the different gimmicks that they have, learning the patterns, using Samus's abilities to try and jump over certain attacks or phase through or get almost like a visceral attack on the boss. There is a very large world, a very, at times, confusing world. I know that this game is designed to be speedrun and it is designed for multiple playthroughs, but honestly, just on my first playthrough, I did really enjoy the gameplay. The segments where the robots are chasing you down aren't everywhere, so if that kind of idea does give you some anxiety, it's not the end of the world. The majority of the game is not really like that, but it is fast-paced and frenetic. For me, that works out great. I enjoyed it. So it's fast-paced, it's slick, it feels great to play. It's Metroid, so you know what you're gonna get. And the story's a little odd. It's another one of those where you start off with everything, then you lose a battle. They take everything away, and you have to work your way through the map to regain those abilities so you can build up and eventually fight the end boss. But it's definitely worth a playthrough, especially if you're a Metroid fan, especially if you like the Metroidvania genre. This is the franchise that started it all, and definitely would recommend Metroid Dread. For me, it came in at number 12 for 2022. Down to number 11, and we're back to another Atlus game. This time, Catherine Full Body. Now, this game admittedly isn't for everyone. It does have an adult theme to it, although it's not anything that you won't see in a typical PG-13 movie nowadays. It's just a guy who's trying to live his life with his girlfriend. Everything goes haywire. He meets another girl. Something's really wrong. He's just trying to make it work. The big element of this game is it's actually a puzzle game. When he goes to sleep, he ends up in this dream world, along with a whole bunch of other people who are represented by these sheep. The entire idea is he needs to get to the top of each of these levels in order to survive. There are different types of blocks in it. There's a lot of learning as far as how to move multiple blocks out of the way to make different designs to help you get higher in the level so you can make it to the next one. And the story is really fun and out there. I mean, like I said, it has an adult theme to it. They're talking about adultery and relationships and anxiety, and the main character doesn't know what's going on in this world and which end is up. The cutscenes, the dialogue, story behind it is honestly really fun. You've got your buddies there that you're talking to and you're trying to talk through these problems. And a great puzzle game. It might have been the only real puzzle game that I played last year. But Catherine Full Body, if you don't mind sort of that adult theme, definitely an excellent game. On to number 10, and this goes to Octopath Traveler. Again, this is an older game. It didn't come out in 2022, but I hunted down a copy. Unfortunately, it's just none of these are the actual case because GameStop didn't give me the case. You choose one of 8 travelers and you move through the story, and there are basically different chapters for each one of the 8. So you can play through each chapter on each character. It is a traditional JRPG in that it's turn-based, but it does have the element where you're building up this boost gauge, and then you can unleash it to do multiple attacks or a bigger attack to charge up your abilities. And there are different elements to it. You can break your enemies so that now you're doing additional damage. The 2D HD art style is really cool. I like it a lot. It really reminds me of the old Final Fantasy III look with that pixelated style, but now against a more of a diorama looking background. It's a little bit disjointed in the story. The characters do have banter back and forth, but it doesn't make a huge difference in the relationships of the characters. None of that stuff kind of develops. But for the individual stories to play out, it's almost like playing 8 games in one, and then an additional one if you play through the final boss, which gave me some trouble. Octopath Traveler was a huge hit with me. Definitely brought me back to those old school Final Fantasy games. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the combat system. I enjoyed the art style. I loved the special effects on the boosts and the spells, and the class system where you got to mix things up and change the secondary class of each of your individual party members, which would make for some very interesting combinations. You also equip these secondary passive abilities. So it's a JRPG with a lot of depth and that old school Final Fantasy look and vibe that really strikes home with me. For 2022, Octopath Traveler clocks in at number 10. At number 9, we have another legend that I didn't get to play when it first came out. It's not this game. This is God of War Ragnarok, which I'm still playing through, but I have not gotten to finish yet. It's the original God of War from 2018. Now, I had heard a lot about the game with its one-take style to it. I love God of War. I played through the original and God of War 3 back in the day, but I didn't get to 2018's God of War until this past year. I tried to play through it before Ragnarok came out. I finished it a little after Ragnarok came out, which kind of pushed Ragnarok back, but I will get to it in 2023. Everything everyone told me was true. The game is amazing. The story is excellent. Kratos, this literal god of war, this juggernaut, this heartless, if you've played through the original games, seemingly heartless character at times, is genuinely bonding with his son while trying to do everything he can to help him survive, and also spreading the ashes of his deceased wife. I mean, the story has everything. Just trying to help Atreus make it through life and not sure what to do as far as telling Atreus what he really is. He's just trying to do the best he can to raise his son and prepare him for the rest of his life. The characters in the game, the voice acting, the graphics for especially 4 years ago. It is a very linear game, even though you can eventually hop around to different areas. And I did find the original fight with Baldur set me up a little bit. I was like, man, I hope every enemy isn't a sponge like this guy. Thankfully, they weren't. I think one of the criticisms I have is that I wish there were more individual bosses to it rather than just kind of a souped up version of what you were fighting. If you really think back, I can only think of a handful of bosses to the game. God of War 2018 is definitely a classic, and I look forward to finishing Ragnarok in 2023. All right, moving on to number 8. It's another classic, this time Dark Souls Remastered. I went down the Dark Souls rabbit hole because of a game that we're going to mention later in the list. I had high hopes heading into Dark Souls Remastered because of everything I played before it. And when I got into the game, I was not disappointed. Now, Dark Souls is a very old game. Even the remastered version does have a little bit of a janky look to it, but the gameplay is excellent. It's slower than some of the other games. It has more of a bait and attack and then counter sort of mentality to it. Shields are a big thing in the original Dark Souls. The game does not disappoint. The interconnected levels with the shortcuts, doing what you can to upgrade your equipment and your weapons, trying to find something that works that you can survive on, upgrading your Estus flasks. There's so much to find and do in the original Dark Souls Remastered. It really is impressive, even though my first time playing through it was in 2022. The biggest issue with Dark Souls now is just that the newer games have come out and some of the bosses can feel a little frustrating, a little annoying, not really challenging, not really that Souls experience that we've come to know and love. There are still excellent fights. The DLC is excellent. The first time you fight Ornstein and Smo or Artorias or get to Anorlando and you're working through it and you're seeing that not everything is as it seems, it still lives up to that hype even today. Even Blighttown, even some of the negatives, the butterfly boss. Okay, so there's some things that were perfect, but you have to give it extra credit for when it was made. You have to give it extra credit for what it spawned, which has been the amazing Soulsborne series from FromSoft. And I love my time with Dark Souls Remastered, which comes in at number 8 on my list for 2022. At number 7 is a game that I thoroughly enjoyed playing. It took me 40 runs to finally make it through, but coming in at number 7 is Hades. Now, I originally played it on the Nintendo Switch. I recently picked it up on PlayStation 5, so that'll tell you how much I enjoyed this game. God, almost knocked everything over. But Hades is a masterpiece. Basically, you're going to try and make your way out of hell. Your father is trying to keep you there, and the denizens of hell are trying to keep you in. You get to select your weapon, play through, get as far as you possibly can, earn little side elements that help you build up and make you stronger for the next run. And if you fail, you got to go back there and hear it from dad making fun of you failing. And you're talking to your relatives and you're talking to the other gods and legends that are there with you. And it's just a fun, fast, still somewhat comical and exciting game that I loved my time with. Hades has so much depth to the story. I don't know how many different lines of dialogue the characters learn, because as you move through and you find different characters and you experience different things, or you make it out for your first run, everything changes. Super silky smooth combat, so fast, so enjoyable. There is almost no negative that I could find to Hades. It isn't an easy game, so if you're not really a fan of spending some time getting to learn mechanics and getting better at a game, Hades is going to be difficult on you. And Hades is a true masterpiece that everyone should pick up and play at least once. And for me, it comes in at number 7 for 2022. We're getting close to the top now, and you're going to see a bit of a trend when we get up here. Coming in at number 6 is another FromSoft game. This time it's Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro is a Soulsborne game, but it is much more about rhythm and timing, and the movement is fluid, and you have a grappling hook. There's much more story in it. Your character actually has lines and says things, which is very different for a FromSoft game. It is very difficult. It is very different from the other Souls games. It takes some time to adapt. You are not supposed to dodge everything or block everything. You're supposed to parry it, so you need to time it up and build up the posture bar of your enemy so you can deliver a death blow. This game will challenge you. This game is not easy. It does have a full story to it. It is fully voice acted out by your characters. There are multiple characters that you interact with. It's kind of a limited cast. It's not a whole lot of people. But the stealth mechanics to it, sneaking up on people, or jumping out of the rafters in a ceiling in Deathblow, or the different battles with the Demon of Hatred, all of these amazing bosses and characters. The gimmick bosses are even fun. There are some elements of this game, there are some things that happen that you will never forget if you can actually make it through Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. It is so different to the other games and so worth playing. This is another game that I did platinum, although I wouldn't really recommend the platinum because the end is a lot of grinding just to max out your abilities, because It's honestly the last thing you have to do. You also have to beat the game multiple times in order to get the platinum. That'll tell you just how much I enjoyed this game. It has a style all its own. We definitely need to see some kind of a sequel or follow-up in the future, but Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is an amazing game, an amazing experience, and I highly recommend it. For me, it was the 6th best game I played in 2022. All right, moving on to the top 5. Number 5, another FromSoft game, Bloodborne. Bloodborne is a Soulsborne if it was in a slightly more modern, dark era where there's this plague that's running rampant and it's driving people insane and mutating them. There are all kinds of crazy, fantastical enemies out there, but it is something unlike anything else you'll ever play. Now, like Dark Souls Remastered, Bloodborne does look dated in some elements. The biggest thing is in the lighting and the frame rate. The game only runs at 30 frames per second, where a lot of these other games you can get at 60 frames. But the 30 frames per second, and then the lighting, the way that things reflect, it makes it look like there are items to pick up all over the place and there are bright spots. Honestly, that's the biggest thing. The overall aesthetic and look of the game is unlike anything else I've ever played. It's dark, it's dreary, it's depressing, it's awesome. I absolutely loved playing in the world of Bloodborne. There are some crazy things that happen in this game. There are some crazy enemies. The boss battles are excellent, especially when you get into the DLC and you're fighting Lady Maria and you're fighting the Orphan of Kos, one of the most difficult enemies in all of Soulsborne. This game is absolutely amazing, and it's a shocker to me, honestly, and I think most people, that this game hasn't been remade or a sequel hasn't been made. I know there's been a lot of fan stuff put out there, but Bloodborne needs another game of some sort. Number 5, mostly just because of the dated nature of the frame rate, of the lighting, but I absolutely love Bloodborne. It's a fantastic game. It's free if you're a PlayStation 5 owner, so if you haven't played it yet, play Bloodborne. Just prepare yourself for that lower frame rate and the lighting issues that I mentioned before. Number 4 is another game from 2022. This time it's Sifu. Sifu is one of the first games I played in 2022, and it's the first time in forever that I played a game, not even that much of the game, a few hours later, and I was talking to any gamer that I knew, relatives, family, friends. I was telling them about this game. The combat, the scenes, it was such a memorable game for me. As of now, Sifu is definitely, in my opinion, the best indie of 2022. I still have yet to play Tunic, but the combat, the hand-to-hand fighting, the close-ups, the style, the camera work, the story behind it, it is an amazing game. The biggest negative to it is the length. I hope that there's some kind of DLC coming in the future to lengthen out the story, to give you some more levels. But man, I mean, when you first break someone's posture and do a finisher on them, or you slam their head into the side of a wall, or you're taking on 8 people at once, I mean, the second level, when you break into that club and there's a bunch of people standing around and you run in and you start wailing on people, I mean, it is so much fun. It has so much style. Like I said, I haven't felt that way about a game in quite a while. It has these amazing scenes that you will not forget. When you're running down a hallway and the lights are flashing, or a building's burning down and you see your enemy in the distance and you're chasing after them, or the boss battles, the hallway scene straight out of the Daredevil Netflix series. I mean, this game is absolutely awesome. If you haven't tried Sifu, I don't know what you're waiting for. Sifu blew my mind. I absolutely love that game, and I would recommend it to anybody who's interested in that old school kung fu movie come to life, and now you're the main character. The only negatives to Sifu is that it's a very short game. It only has 5 levels, and it is exceptionally difficult. That could be a plus or minus depending on how you feel about it. And that's honestly it. Everything else about the game is awesome. So that's how Sifu gets into my top 5 at number 4. At number 3, it's another Soulsborne, Dark Souls 3. It might be controversial that I put Dark Souls 3 ahead of several of the other Soulsbornes, particularly Bloodborne and the original Dark Souls Remastered, as they're fan favorites to be sure. But the main reason that I put this ahead of those two games is that it is just much more fluid. It plays with the full 60 frames per second. It has the improved lighting. It has the improved mechanics. It just looks better. It feels better. It's a more modern game. Is it as groundbreaking as the other two games? No, it's not. But it is the most modern FromSoft game prior to a big release from this year. And honestly, I really enjoyed my time with it. The big thing that I've taken from the Soulsborne games and FromSoft in particular is I really enjoy the challenge of some great bosses. Bigger than life, challenging, fast, gruesome, difficult bosses. Some of the bosses from the original Dark Souls 1 and some of the other games really aren't that. They're either very easy or telegraphed, or in the case of some, very obnoxious or really gimmicky bosses. Bed of Chaos is an example from Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 3 has some of the best bosses in all of Soulsborne. I can say that I loved the fight against Dancer. I loved the fight against Gale, of course. Dark Eater Madir messed me up for several hours. Took me a long time. I really couldn't get the hang of swinging at the head of a dragon after all of these other games are telling you to go for the legs. Sister Freed, amazing bosses in this game. And it's just that extra bit of polish, that smoother frame rate, the better looking graphics that pulls it ahead of Bloodborne and Dark Souls 1. It is a traditional Soulsborne where Sekiro is not. I loved my time with Sekiro, but Dark Souls 3 out of the group is the best in my opinion from the traditional Soulsborne games, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. Now on to number 2, Shimagami Tensei 5. I already had Catherine Full Body on here for Atlus. I absolutely love Persona 5. Shimagami Tensei 5 was a real standout for me. I didn't know what I was getting into. It was my first Shimagami Tensei game. I had played Persona 5. The thing that I think could put people off is the game is really hard. Like much harder than Persona 5, and it caught me off guard. I was playing 2 very difficult games, 3 difficult games. Sifu was one, Shimagami Tensei 5 was another, and another game that I haven't mentioned. Between that, it was 3 really difficult games, and Shimagami Tensei 5 was no slouch with it. It has everything you want from an SMT or Persona game. It has the fusions, it has the demons. Unfortunately, it has the protagonist who doesn't say anything. In this game in particular, the demons are the stars of the show. Between the personalities they have, the special abilities, when you get deep into the game and you're getting these demons with these crazy moves with cutscenes, and you're doing insane damage, or you're healing your entire party, or you're putting these crazy buffs on your team, it is really fun. It's honestly the best turn-based experience I've had in a JRPG in a very long time, possibly the best I've ever had. You might come to me and say, but Pyrus, you've been complaining about frame rates in a bunch of these games. Yes, I have. It's not as big a deal in a turn-based JRPG as it is in something like Bloodborne. And again, I love Bloodborne. This list is really tough, especially near the top. The open world aspect to this game is probably the weakest point, but at the same time it does a lot of new things with the ability to jump and how you navigate around, and you're getting to these secret areas and you're finding these little Mimons scattered around, and you can pick sides in different battles and befriend different people. Some of the side quests are kind of take it or leave it, but the main boss battles are great. Building out your team, fusing demons, getting those special abilities, those big cutscenes, doing crazy damage to the bosses is all great fun, and it's a super challenging game that if you make it through, it feels really rewarding. For me, the second best game I played in 2022, Shimagami Tensei 5. Alright, so it's probably not going to come as a big surprise what the last game on my list is. There's one big notable exception, and with all the Soulsborne games that have been on this list, you can probably hazard a guess as to my number 1. It's also been sitting on the desk the whole time. Elden Ring, for me, was the most influential and best game of 2022. Now, I will admit I have not finished playing through God of War Ragnarok, but honestly, I don't think that Ragnarok could change my mind on this. And the main reason why is because Elden Ring was like nothing I'd ever played before. It was my first FromSoft game. It was my first foray into the Soulsborne. And it was the first time that I went out into a world that was ready to rip me limb from limb. And I just explored. I looked for any way to get a little bit more power so that I could try to take on a boss that was in my way or explore another cavern. And listen, the game is tough. The little side caverns are difficult. The little tiniest imp enemy statue gargoyle thing could jump out of the ceiling and murder you at any second. It is brutal. And as you get deeper into the game, you start fighting some of the extra bosses, the side content. It doesn't get any easier. Melania is one of the true struggles in all of video games, and she happened to exist in the best game of 2022. There are so many great bosses in this game. I mentioned in Dark Souls 3, the main reason I had it so high was the boss battles. Elden Ring is right there. Just your first battle. As soon as you walk up to the bridge and Margit the Fell greets you and promptly beats you to a pulp with fast moves and chained combos and magic, mystical hammer slams, insane stuff. Edge of your seat. I mean, when you take down one of these bosses, it is pulse pounding. Add to that the ability to just have a jump button. I mean, it was my first Soulsborne game, and the only other one that has a dedicated jump button is Sekiro. So it took a while for me to get to that one, but I really missed it when I went into Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne. Just that addition, along with the open world exploration, using torrent to get to different areas, finding all kinds of mysteries and caverns, and the first time you fight the Godskin duo, I mean, that was the original Ornstein Smo for me because it was my first game in Soulsborne. And the big thing is this: Elden Ring will give you the tools necessary to succeed. You may need to use summons, you may need to bring in other players, you may need to just spend time leveling up or finding a new weapon or learning a new spell or building up your stats in some way. There's always a way to move forward. The big reason behind it is because it's not anywhere near as linear as the other games, because you can literally go anywhere. If you run out there and the tree sentinel greets you and you bang your head against the wall and you fight him until you win, you might be at it for a while. The Lands Between is a really amazing place. It's honestly awe-inspiring. When you compare it to some of the games that I played growing up, it's really insane. Honestly, the only game that really compares to this for me, as far as an open world game that really made you want to explore every nook and cranny, it's Breath of the Wild. That's it. It's Elden Ring and it's Breath of the Wild. But if you look at the effect that Elden Ring had at the beginning of 2022, it literally swallowed up Horizon Forbidden West whole and spat it out. I mean, insane. Horizon Forbidden West is still in my backlog, and the main reason why is because I also had to play through Horizon Zero Dawn because I'd never played through that. I got about a third of the way in, but Elden Ring just ate up my hours. It's the only game that I played through a full 2 times on 2 different characters, and I think I played well into the second playthrough on my first character as well. I absolutely loved every minute. Let me rephrase. I didn't love every minute with Elden Ring because there is a lot of frustration. There is a lot of pain and agony and learning to deal with it and figuring out how you're going to make it to the next area or past the next boss. But the sense of accomplishment for that game and what it did for me as a gamer and getting me into this world of the Soulsborne, of FromSoft in a huge way and making it seem like something that I could do, honestly, it really changed the gaming landscape for me and for I think a lot of people in 2022. So again, for me, the best game I played in 2022, one of the best games I've ever played, possibly the best game I ever played, Elden Ring has got to take the #1 spot. All right, so that's going to do it for my list for this year. Hopefully next year my goal is going to be at least 30 games on this list, and maybe we'll do another recap. We'll see how you guys respond to this one. Let me know in the comments down below either what were your favorite games that you beat in 2022, or is there something that I didn't rank correctly out of the games that I beat? Would you make some changes maybe to your top 3 or 5? Let me know in the comments down below. Subscribe if you're looking for more content just like this on my channel. Once again, this is Pyrus from Pyrus Gaming saying thank you for watching. And until next time, I will see you there.